So under the traditional interpretation, we can use this little square with our A, E, I, and O to evaluate the relationship between different statements. So like between an A statement and an E statement, or an A statement and an O statement, or an I statement and an E statement, or an A statement and an I statement. If we have some knowledge about the A statement, we can make an inference about the O statement from that A statement alone. So we're essentially creating immediate arguments. One premise, an A statement, one conclusion, an O statement. Is it valid? If A statement's true, is the O statement necessarily true as well? So let's look at our first relationship between these statements, and this is called contradictories. So we have our statements: A, all S or P; E, no S or P; I, some S or P; and O, some S or not P. Now, if statements are contradictories, it means that if one is true, then the other has to be false. And if one is false, the other has to be true. So if I'm making an inference from an A statement to an O statement, I know that my inference is not going to be valid. Why? Because I'm going to have a true premise, but my conclusion is going to be false. And remember, that's the definition of invalidity. If the premises are true, but your conclusion is false, then you have an invalid argument. So let's go over an example before I dive into the next relationship. So let's say we have a statement like, all dogs are friendly animals. That's an A statement. All dogs are friendly animals. Now, if I go across the square to O, I have the statement, an O statement is, some dogs are not friendly animals. So when I'm evaluating the relationship between these statements, I'm maintaining the same subject and predicate class. I'm not changing around my P's and S's. I'm keeping the same. So notice all S or P. So S is going to denote dogs. P is going to denote friendly animals. So when I'm looking at the relationship between an A and O, I keep the same subject, dogs, and I keep the same predicate, friendly animals. I just change the quality and quantity of the statement, the quantifier. See, all is going to be different than some. And since I'm moving from a universal affirmation into a particular negation, I got to add that negation here. But let's look at these now. All dogs are friendly animals. If this is true, then the statement, some dogs are not friendly animals, has to be false. Why? Because the statement, all dogs are friendly animals, is saying that everything is a dog is a friendly animal. But the statement, some dogs are not friendly animals, is saying that there's at least one dog that's not a friendly animal. And notice that that's a contradiction to our A statement. So if the A statement is true, then necessarily that O statement has to be false. And on the flip side as well, if that O statement is true, then that A statement has to be false. So if I know the truth value of one of my statements, then I immediately know the truth value of the other statement. If one of them is false, then the other one has to be true. Okay. So another relationship that we can see with our traditional square is that of contraries. So a contrary between A and E is basically when two statements that can both be false at the same time but cannot both be true. So here my A statement, all S or P, and then my E statement, no S or P. So they're both universals, but one's an affirmative and one's a negative. And so we're going to plug in some values for S and P to help us understand what's going on here. All dogs are friends. That's saying that everything that is a dog is going to be a friend. If that's true, then it can't be the case that no dogs are friends, because that's saying that everything is dog is not a friend. However, both can be false at the same time. So if I say all dogs are friends, if that's false, then there's at least one dog that's not a friend. And that's probably true, right? There's at least one dog out there that's not a friend. Like there's tons of homeless dogs out in the world. So maybe one of those homeless dogs, unfortunately, doesn't have any friends. So it's not a friend to anybody. So assume this statement is false. This bottom statement, this E statement, can also be false at the same time. No dogs are friends. If that's false, then there's at least one dog that is a friend. Just because all dogs are friends is false, where there's one dog that's not a friend, doesn't mean that no dogs are friends has to be true, because there might be a dog out there that is a friend. Because we're only taught if the statement is negated, then we're just making the stipulation that there's at least one member of the class dogs that's not a friend for this top one. And for this bottom one, if it's false, we're making the statement, or we're making the claim that there's at least one dog who is a friend. So totally possible for both to be false at the same time, but it is not possible for both to be true at the same time. So if all dogs are friends is true, then no dogs are friends has to be false. But if no dogs are friends is true, then all dogs are friends has to be false. So that is the relationship between the A and the E. Subcontraries. So these are pairs of propositions that cannot both be false, but they both can be true. So if one is false, then the other must be true. But if one is true, then the other is indeterminate. We can't make an inference. So this is the relationship between I and O at the bottom of our traditional square. So let's plug in some values. Some dogs are police. This is true, right? There's some police dogs out there. I'm sure you've seen them. The corresponding O statement, some dogs are not police. That's also true, right? Because like my dog is a dog, but is not a police officer. So both of these statements can be true, and in this example, both are in fact true. But both cannot be false. So if I say some dogs are police is false, that means there's not a single dog that's a police officer. But if there's not a single dog that's a police officer, then the statement some dogs are not police, if that's false, that's saying all dogs are police officers, right? If some dogs are not police is false, then that means that, well, let's back this up. Some dogs are not police. If that's true, then there's at least one dog that's not a police. But if that's false, then that means that there's not a single dog that's not a police. So in this example, it just so happens to be that both are true. But if I know that this is true, I can't just immediately assume that this one's true. It's kind of like an open question. Because I know the semantic content of these, the subject and predicate class, I know that this statement is true. And then again, that's why it's so difficult to like piece away the semantics, and you have to do it if you want to do logic, because you can't just say, well, yeah, it is true that some dogs are not police. Look at my dog. She's a dog and she's not a police officer. But that's not enough. That's not going to get us what we need to get. If I know that some dogs are police is true, I can't make the inference that some dogs are not police. Why? Some dogs are police. So let's say this dog's name is Mikey. So Mikey's a dog and he's a police officer. So I have this one dog who's going to be in the class of dogs and in the class of police officers. But the statement, some dogs are not police, just because I know Mikey's a police officer doesn't mean that I know anything about all the other dogs. For all I know, Mike's a police officer, but so are all the other dogs. I don't know. I'd have to go out in the world and look. So I can't just make an inference from the truth of an I statement to the truth of an O statement. It's possible both are true, but not necessarily the case that both are true. Now, it's impossible for both to be false. So if that's false, then I know that this is true. I'm going to write false and like cross it out, but I'm not going to do that. So if I know that some dogs are police are false, Since it's impossible for both to be false at the same time, I know that the corresponding O statement is going to be true. All right. Another relationship, the last one we're going to talk about for the traditional square of opposition, is subalternation. So this is the relationship between a universal and a particular. And again, we're just trying to determine whether we can make any inferences. If I know something about my A statement, if I know it's true or if I know it's false, what can I say for certain about E, O, or I? In this case, this is the relationship between a universal affirmative and a particular affirmative, or on the other side, a universal negative and a particular negative. So it's a relationship between I and A, or on the other side, E and O. So this relationship, if I know an A statement is true, then I know for sure that the I statement has to be true. In other words, if my premise is an A statement and my conclusion is an I statement, then I know I have a valid argument, because it is impossible for the A statement to be true, but the corresponding I statement to be false. Let's look at an example. All dogs are mammals. That's saying every single thing that's a dog is a mammal. That's true. If that's true, it's impossible for the statement, some dogs are mammals, to be false. If every single thing that's a dog is also a mammal, then of course there's at least one dog that's a mammal. That it follows logically. On the other side, same thing goes for the E and the O. If I know that no dogs are reptiles, then for sure some dogs are not reptiles is going to be true as well. And that's like, if every single thing that's a dog is not a reptile, then there's going to be at least one dog who's also not a reptile. It's a valid inference. But the relationship going up doesn't work the same way. So if it's true that some dogs are mammals, I don't know for sure that all dogs are mammals. And again, that's not a good example because the semantics is getting in the way. And you're like, of course all dogs are mammals. So let's use the police officer one. So some dogs are police officers. That's true. But from that, I can't say for certain that all dogs are police officers. And that's false anyways. But I don't know that. From that I statement, the truth of that I statement, I can't infer the truth of that A statement. Same thing on the O side. If an O statement is true, I don't know whether or not the E statement is true or false. Could be true, could be false. I need more information. However, if an I statement is false, then I know for sure that the A statement is going to be false as well. So how does that work? Let's look at the I statement. Some dogs are mean animals. So if some dogs are mean animals, then it means there's at least one dog who's going to fall into class mean animals. So that's what it's saying if it's true. Now, if that statement's false, some dogs are mean animals. If that's false, then I know for sure the statement, all dogs are mean animals, are going to be false as well. So how does that work? If all dogs are mean animals is true, then every single member of the class dog is going to be in the class mean animals. But if I know for sure that some dogs are mean animals is false, so some dogs are mean animals saying there's at least one dog that's a mean animal. If it's false, then I know that there's no dogs that are mean animals. So I know it's false that all dogs are mean animals. I know that's going to be false. Same thing goes on the other side. So if the O statement is false, then I know for sure the E statement is going to be false. But now let's look at one more relationship. If the A statement is false, I cannot make an inference about my I statement. So all dogs are nice. If that's false, then it means that all the dogs who exist, they're not all going to be nice. Because if it's true, all dogs are nice, then every single thing that's a dog is going to be nice. But if that's false, then not all of the dogs are going to be nice. But if we look at the corresponding I statement, some dogs are nice, just because all dogs are nice is false, doesn't mean that some dogs are nice or false, because it only takes one. If one dog is nice, then that I statement is true. But just because one dog is nice doesn't mean that all dogs are nice. So a universal statement is it's easy to prove it's false. You just need one counterexample, one member that's not going to fit into that predicate class. But with the I statement, it's much easier to prove because you just need that one member that does fall in that predicate class. So just because an A statement is false doesn't mean that the I statement is going to be false, but it also doesn't mean that the I statement is going to be true. You have to look out in the world. It's not enough information knowing about the A statement's truth value to make an inference about the I statement's truth value. Same thing on the other side. If an E statement is false, I can't make an inference about that O statement. I don't know. Could be true, could be false. I have to look into the world and to see. I can't just make an inference. So this whole traditional square of opposition is basically just saying, if I know the truth value of one of these statements, what can I say about the others? So if I know that A is true, I know for sure that O is going to be false. If I know that A is true, I know for sure that I is going to be true. That's basically the point of the square of opposition. And again, super useful if you memorize these relationships, but it's not necessary, because if you could just think about the proposition and think about what it's actually saying, its literal meaning, then you can reason about the corresponding E, I, and O statements all on your own. But of course, if you don't want to reason and you just want to memorize, then it's important to understand, what does it mean to be a contrary? What does it mean to be a contradictory? What does it mean to be subcontraries? And what does subalternation mean? But again, this is just kind of like adding a layer of, all right, you don't understand it, so just memorize the stuff. If you understand them all, then you don't need to memorize this stuff.